Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I'm gonna show you guys how to build a Wordle clone in React. So I asked a lot of you guys if you guys wanted to see something like this, especially because Wordle right now is very popular, and you guys said you guys want it. Because in my opinion, this is a really cool project. I had a lot of fun building this, and it's surprisingly not that hard. So I felt like it's a good intermediate React project, which would be perfect for a resume because it shows that you really know React, and it teaches you a lot of the basics and actual fundamentals of React. So for that reason, I decided to make this video. It might be a little bit long. I don't know how long it's going to take. However, if you want to check out all the code will be in the description, together with all the information related to the video. So before we get into the tutorial, I want to actually give a little demo of what we're building. So you can see it's obviously, it looks like Wordle. It's not exactly the same because there are some features that I didn't add because they would just make it like it's not fundamental to the project. I just added most of the crucial features for Wordle. For example, the nav bar is basically empty, and you can see it just says Wordle, but then there's like a little grid over here where you can start typing. So for example, right now, I don't know what the word is, but it randomizes every time you try, right? So for example, I'm gonna try irate, and I can just type on my keyboard and the letters will appear over here. I can also type on this keyboard over here, and it will also work, as you can see. And when I press enter, you can see it will give me, if it's yellow, it means the letter exists in the word. If it's not, then it means it doesn't. And you can see now we can't use this ones as well. So we can continue trying if we want to. I'm just gonna fail just so you guys can see what happens when we fail. But basically, at the end, if we fail, it says you failed to guess the word, and the word was actually aping, which I don't even know what it is, but I got a bank of words, and we're gonna be using that one to detect which words we're gonna have. So yeah, that's basically the game. It's really nice, really cool to play. I can actually play this on my own, and I'll have a lot of fun because I can play. It's kind of like infinite Wordle, because Wordle is once a day. This one you can just play how many times you want. So yeah, I find it to be a really cool project. So with that in mind, if you guys could leave a like before we get into the video, I would massively appreciate it. It would help push my videos to more people and just support the channel overall. So with that in mind, let's hear a word from the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. As many of you might know, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning. They have courses on a multitude of topics such as React, TypeScript, NodeJS, and much more. A course that I took and I really liked was the Modern CSS Writing Better, Cleaner, More Scalable Code course by Harry Roberts. CSS is definitely one of my weak points in web development, and this course helped me find a better approach to learning the technology. One of the best aspects of Skillshare is that it is curated specifically for learning, meaning that there are no ads and they're always launching new premium classes so that you can stay focused and learn as many skills as you desire in 2022. The first 1,000 of my subscribers that click the link in the description will get a month free trial of Skillshare so you can start exploring your creativity today. Okay, everyone. So let's get into writing the code. You can see that I opened a project inside of VS Code, inside of a folder called Wordle, but currently there's nothing inside of the project. And in order to actually start creating the project, I'm just going to come to the terminal and run the command yarn create React app like this. And I'm going to put a dot to say that I want to create it inside of this folder, and it's going to start generating all of the packages that we need for this project. I'm not going to be using any external library, I believe. Yeah, I'm not going to use any external library. Everything will be done with pure React, just the core React that comes with Create React App. So keep that in mind while we're building the project. So as you can see, it generated the project. I'm going to run yarn start like this, and it's going to start running the project inside of our local host. And as you can see, it did appear here. It's just the simple React code that comes with Create React App. So we're going to start by changing that a little bit. So we're first going to come to the source folder, and we're going to delete a couple files, which I always do when I set up a project with Create React App. We're going to delete the setup test because we're not going to be testing, the logo, the index.css, and the app.test.js. So I'm just going to delete all of these files and move them to trash. Then after we move them to trash, we got to delete the instances where we import those files. So for example, I'll just delete the index.css import over here. And on the app.js, I'll just delete literally everything because we're going to be rewriting all of our code over here, and the logo as well. So what my plan for this video is, I won't be focusing at all with CSS. I did write all of the CSS that I exist in this project. However, since it's not the point of the point of the video is more focused on logic and like how to code in React, and not in CSS. I'm just gonna leave the CSS, paste everything now in the beginning, and if you guys want to check it out, just download the code from GitHub and just use the same CSS as I am using. So as you can see, I just pasted all the CSS that we'll be using in this video. Obviously, all of these classes don't make sense yet because we haven't created them. But throughout the video, we'll be adding classes and IDs to the elements inside of our code. So all the CSS will slowly but surely make the website look a little bit better. So for now, let's just see how it looks. And it just looks like an empty website, but with the color of the website for Wordle. So what we want to do now is we want to start by setting up the structure of our project. So I'm going to create a folder first of all called components. And this folder will include all the components we're going to have in our project. And before we create any component, we got to think about how our project hierarchy or our project tree will be structured. So in the app component, we're going to have a very simple nav over here. Something not that big, just saying something like Wordle, right? The little nav that we have on that I showed you guys in the beginning of the video. So I'm going to say Wordle like this. I'm going to save it. And as you can see, now we have the nav bar because the CSS that I pasted automatically just adds the styling correct for every element. So what we need now is we need to think about what we're going to put right below it. So the idea is we have a board, right, with a grid with a bunch of cells where we can put letters. And right below it, we have like the keyboard, right? The keyboard that we kind of create on our own. So we're basically going to have two different components over here. One called board, or we can call it whatever we want. And another one called keyboard. And they will be right one on top of each other because that's how it will look, right? We'll have the grid over here and the keyboard right below here. So since we created this, we have to create the components. So I'll just create the board component and board.js, and I'll create the keyboard component like this, keyboard.js. And in order to generate the components, I'm using a snippet, which is I'll just show you guys real quick, is the ES6, ES7 snippet. This one over here, I believe. Yeah, and it basically just, when you go to a component or a file and you write RFCE, it will auto-generate a component for you. So I use this in every single project that I code, and I would recommend having it as well. So we'll just do it on both of them because it'll just make it a lot faster. So now we have two components that are right on one on top of each other, right? So what exactly do we want to do now? Well, I would say a good place to start is just building the board, because that will be the basis for all of the logic we're going to write in our code. And it's not even that hard. It's just you got to think about how exactly a board will work, right? What represents that cell with a bunch of letters that we see on the Wordle game? So the way I see it is we have basically a word, right? And a word in JavaScript or in any language is just an array of characters, right? For example, the word Wordle is just an array where we have the letter W, then the letter O, then you get what I mean, right? So every word can be represented by an array of characters. And when you look at Wordle, you can have 5-letter words with, and I'll just put like this, word. I'll put the other ones as well. So you have 5-letter words, but you have 6 attempts to try them, right? So the grid will basically be an array full of arrays, right? Because we'll have an array over here, which will have the first word that we try. Then we'll have the second word that we try, then we'll have the third and continuing. So it's basically an array of arrays, which if you know the mathematical term for that, this is a matrix. So the structure of how we're going to base our project is on a board that is made out of a matrix. So I know that sounds a little bit complicated, but let's just create the matrix right now, and that will be what we'll be using throughout our video. So in order to do that, I'm going to create basically a file that's going to be a helper for us called words, and inside of here we're going to put a bunch of functions or stuff that doesn't match in individual components but will be reused throughout the project. And in this words file, we're going to start out by coming and creating a variable, which is the matrix. So we're going to say const board default, because this is the default value of the board. When we initialize our project, this is how it will look. So it will be an array, and inside of this array there will be 6 different arrays which will contain 5 letters inside of them. So the first one, they will all start as empty letters because the board in Wordle starts empty, right? So we'll just have 5 characters like this, and we'll just copy and paste this a couple times just so we have 6 attempts. So as you can see, this is our matrix. We have one array, and each array inside of them represents a new attempt, and it kind of looks like the cell that we're going to be creating on the game. So why are we doing this? Because now we're going to create a state in our project called board, which will represent which letter is on each cell of the board. So I'm going to come to the board component over here, and let's create a state called board and set board like this, and we're going to set this equal to UseState. And this will be basically the state that defines most of our project. Its initial value will be the board default matrix that we created, and because it initializes as a bunch of empty letters. But one thing I want to point out is that throughout this tutorial, I believe you'll start understanding more when the visual part starts appearing. You can look back at your code and you'll fully understand it, because there is a lot of logic, underlying logic, that we need to first establish so that everything works perfectly. That is a little complicated to understand at first, but trust me, you'll get it as we get along, because the visual part is very self-explanatory. So you can see we're creating this board state, and now we are inside of our board component. And in this component, the UI will be pretty simple. We're going to create a div over here, which will have a class name of board. And the way we create the cells in React or in any kind of project like this is basically we have our major board, the div encompassing the whole board, and then we have a couple divs inside of this representing different rows inside of the bar. So in our case, we have the board, which is the main array, and then 6 rows inside of it, right? So we can just create this div over here with a class name of row, and we can just copy and paste row 6 times, or 5 more times, right? Because it's 6 attempts. And this is basically the format of our board. We can check to see how it's looking, and you can see it's saying keyboard and board is not defined. Oh, the reason for that is because we haven't imported both the keyboard and the board components over here. So I'll just do this real quick and say import keyboard from the keyboard components class as well. So we'll just come over here, and you can see we basically can't see anything. As of right now, it doesn't look good at all, but it's because we haven't added anything to inside of the rows of our board. And what exactly are we going to add here? Well, if you think about it, inside of the row, we'll have 5 letters each, because each row represents 1 attempt to try to guess the word. So in order to make this work, we're going to create a new component called letter. And this component will basically represent the little letter that you guess for like each individual letter of each individual attempt of guessing the word. So the letter component will be very simple, but also very useful for us. The reason for that is because it's going to first of all take in 2 different props. The first one is the letter position, and the second one is the attempt value. So both of them is just a way for us to get exactly what letter represents this individual cell. So for example, inside of our board over here, and I'll just close all of the other components so it becomes easier to see. Inside of each of the rows, we're going to call the letter component 5 times like this. I'll just paste it 5 times, and each of them will have a letter position and an attempt value. And I'll just paste it 5 times so that we can just individually write them. So each row will have 5 of them. And what exactly is the letter position and what exactly is the attempted value? So if we look at the words file over here, this over here is the letter position is 0 because it is the first letter of the word you're guessing, but the attempt val is also 0 because this is the first attempt you're working through, right? So imagine the grid in Wordle. If you're on your 4th attempt, then attempt val would be 3 because in programming we start at 0. And if you're guessing this letter over here, the letter position will be 2 because it will be 0, 1, 2. So this is how we're going to identify which letter fits, like what exactly are we guessing for each individual letter component. So what we do is initially for the first row, it will be represented by 0, 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4. And then for the attempt val, it will basically be 0 for all of them because the first row is only the first attempt, but the letters are changing because there's multiple letters on each word you're guessing. So then we move on and we just copy all of this and we paste it on the second row. The second row, this won't change because each guess also has 5 letters, right? That you can, in 5 possible places you can put a letter. But what will change is your attempt, because now you're attempting the second try, right? You're guessing the second word. So we change this. Now I'm gonna basically paste for the rest of the rows because this takes a little bit, but just copy and paste everything and it should be fine. So as you can see, I just pasted. The changes are barely anything. It's just the exact same thing, but we changed the attempt val to increase by 1 on each attempt, so that now we technically have a working grid. A way to see this working is by putting the class name of letter on this, and the CSS that I added in the beginning should generate a cool grid that as you can see, it kind of resembles the Wordle one. At least there's like the correct amount of letters and the correct amount of attempts you can have, but obviously on each of them it's saying letter instead of the letter you're guessing, or just an empty string, meaning that you didn't guess yet. So let's fix that right now. And the way we're going to fix that is we're going to remove this over here, and we're going to recognize that in order to know which letter we're trying to guess for each of this letter components, we basically just have to say that the letter is equal to the board, whatever is on the board at the attempt value row at the letter position, right? So basically this is how we're going to access each letter individually. Now obviously right now we don't have anything in our board state because we initialize our board state as empty for everything. But if I added something like this over here, an F on this position, then what should happen is on this exact position, it should be working. But there's an issue, and you can see it's because board is not defined on the letter.js component. Now, how will we access this? Well, we can access it by just passing it as props to the letter component, but it would be kind of annoying to put the board as props to each of them. And also, we're probably going to be using the state, both the function and the value, in many different components inside of this project. So what I recommend for this project and what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually not going to be defining this inside of the board component. I'm going to be defining it inside of the app.js component, and I'm going to be using the context API for some state management in our project. So it's going to be pretty simple, but very useful for those who are not that familiar with the context API to actually get some practice working with it throughout a project. So what will the context API help us with? Well, we'll create this a bunch of states over here on the highest level component, and we're just going to pass them through the context so that we don't have to keep passing them as props and be able to access them everywhere inside of our project. So the way we do this is we first have to import from React, like this, from React, the create context function. And right above our app function definition, we'll just say export const, and we'll create our app context right over here. And we'll set this equal to create context. Now we have to export this because we need to have access to this for this on other, because we need to have access to this on other components, but we also need to have access to this inside of this component, because now what we have to do is, we know that we need to access the board state everywhere inside of board and keyboard. I'll probably put it on keyboard as well. It's because we just didn't get there yet. So I'm going to wrap all of this around with the app context.provider. And now everything inside of this provider will have access to the states that we passed it through. And how we pass the states, well, we'll just give it a value, and we can just put here board and set board. And now through the context API, we have access to both of the states anywhere inside of either the letter component or the board component or the keyboard component, because all of them are under this provider over here. So this is good because it's going to set us up for easier code later on. It's going to make our project a lot more organized. So that's pretty good. But how do we have access to the board component on our letter.js file, right? So the way we do this is we're going to import from React over here the UseContext hook. And we also need to import this app context that we created over here. So I'll just say import from, that was created in our app.js file. So I'll just say app, and I'll import the app context. And then right over here, just press enter and say const, then open and close curly braces, set this equal to UseContext, and pass the app context. And now I can just access either the board or the set board by just calling them inside of this object over here, which works because this is exactly what we needed. And now it shouldn't be giving us an error anymore. Let me refresh this. Oh, it gives us an error because in our app.js over here, we have to import the board default that we imported on the board component. So we'll just copy and paste it over here. And also we need to import UseState from React. So I'll just save this and we'll come over here, refresh our page. Oh, and also this over here now is not the correct path. We need to delete one dot so that it's now corrected. So let's save this and check to see if it's working. And yeah, it's working. You can see, I know it's not centered because we still have to add some classes, but you can see that it's actually correctly putting the letters on the correct place. So we basically told on our words file over here that we want a matrix where there's nothing everywhere, but over here we put an F. So it correctly recognizes that that position is the correct one over here, and it sets the letter at that position to be what is being rendered in the letter component. We can add other stuff, like we can put an A over here, we can put a G over here, and you'll see that it will correctly assign them to the correct cell. So that's good. That's a lot of progress already, especially because it's good visual representation of what is happening. But obviously the game, the core aspect of the game is trying to guess the words, and we haven't even gotten close to that yet. So what we can do to start already playing the game is try to start already creating the keyboard component so that we can actually put letters and write letters and like actually guess words on our own. So the keyboard component will be a little bit hard because we actually need to create a keyboard, right? Like a fake keyboard that appears on the screen, and we can click on it and actually write the word. So the way we're going to do this is inside of this keyboard component, we're going to give a class name to this div, and this class name will be just keyboard like this. And inside of here, we're going to have a couple different divs. And the reason for that is because I'm going to open up Wordle over here. Yeah, this is Wordle. This is our code. But basically, you can see that on Wordle, this was the guess for this day. I already did it. But you can see that there's 3 lines on the keyboard, right? There's the top line, which is a little bit bigger than the middle line, and the bottom line, which is a little bit bigger than the middle line as well, but also has the enter and the delete key over here. So what I imagine is they have 3 different divs for each line, right? They have one for each line, and they just center all of them. But since there's less letters on this part over here, it becomes smaller, and they just add individually the enter and the delete button so that it can make it work, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to come over here to our keyboard, and inside of here, we're going to divide our keyboard into 3 different lines. So the first one is going to have a class name of, class name of line 1. And then we'll just create one for each of other lines. There's 3. So line 2 and line 3. And then what I want to do is I want to create an array for each line with each of the keys representing possible keys for that exist in each line, right? So for example, on Wordle, we'll create an array which will be Q, W, E, R, T, Y, U, I, O, P, right? So the way we do this is I'll just paste it right here because I already created those arrays, but you can just look at them and just copy onto your screen. Okay, so as you can see, these are the possible keys. This is the first line, the second line, and the third line. And you might notice that I didn't add the enter and the delete. And the reason for that is because if we don't add them individually, it will cause some issues later on. So I would just much rather just keep letters like we have over here, and I'll just add them individually later. But why did we create 3 different arrays? Why are we creating arrays instead of just individually putting each of the letters in this keyboard as individual divs? Well, because that is the beauty of React. It just makes it a lot easier and less code if we just create arrays and map through them, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. So the way we do this is we come over here to, for example, the line 1, then we're going to say keys1.map, and inside of here we're going to get the individual key, and then we're going to, let me just close this like this, and we're going to return probably a div with the key. At least for now, we're going to do something like this. So I'll just say key, and let's save this, and you should see that in our project, yeah, it lists all of the first line, and we can do the same thing for the other 2 lines. So I'll just copy this, paste it over here, paste it over here, save it, and we can see that it now shows the other lines as well, but obviously the values are different because we need to change this from keys 1 to keys 2 and this one to keys 3. So now let's just look, and you can see the keyboard starting to take shape. But obviously, for styling purposes, creating the keys wouldn't make sense to do it like this, just creating a div. It's actually better, in my opinion, to create an individual component for key, because we're going to put a lot of logic inside of it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to create this component, save it, and instead of just returning div, I'll just return the key component, and just delete this and just paste it 3 more times. Now, what exactly is the key component? Well, this component will take in the value of the key through props. So I'll say keyval equals to the key, and I'll do the same for the other ones like this. And then what we want to do is we're going to come to the key component. Then we're going to say that it accepts a prop called keyval. Inside of this, we're just going to return the keyval like this, keyval. But I'm also going to give a class name to this. The class name will be key. And on my CSS, it will already style it to look like the actual keyboard. So let's check it out. It says key is not defined because we need to import the key component into our keyboard, and then save it. And as you can see, it looks exactly like the keyboard from Wordle. So yeah, the CSS makes everything look perfect right from the start. So that's a thing that I really like, because it was really quick after the CSS was already done. But you might notice that we still don't have the delete key over here and the enter key over here. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to manually add them. So the enter key is on the left. So we're just going to create a key component over here, which will have a key value of enter, like this. I will have one for the delete as well. And the key value will be delete. Now, we'll look over here, and you can see that it seems to work fine. Like we were able to put the enter and the delete thing, but obviously it is too small for the letter. And you can see that on Wordle, the little like icons for the delete and the enter are bigger than the rest. So in order to make something like that work, we're going to come to the key over here, and we're going to put some conditional logic onto the CSS like IDs and class names for this div, which will help us a lot because it's something that we're going to be doing throughout the video. More specifically, I'm going to add an ID over here, yeah, like this, and then this ID will be dependent on whether or not this should be a big key or not, right? So how do we know if this is a big key or not? Well, let's just pass a prop over here called big key, and this prop will be a true or false statement. If it's true, then we want to make the key bigger. So if big key, then let's set the ID to big like this. If not, let's just not set any ID, and this will differentiate the keys for the delete and the enter, because now for both of them I can just say big key is equal to true, and you'll see that the CSS, since on the CSS I do have the ID the ID for big, I set the width bigger. I can just come to over here and you can see that and you refresh the page, it still doesn't work. Let me see why. Okay, yeah, I just forgot to put another ampersand over here. So I'll just save this, and you can see now both of the keys look better. So one thing that is annoying me right now is the fact that it's not centered, because it should be. And I know that what I did to make it center through the CSS is I just came here to the app.js, and right around the board and the keyboard, we can basically separate the navbar from them by creating a div that it's purely for style purposes. You don't need to create this if you're not making it exactly like mine, but we'll just add a class name of game, and the CSS will do its work where it will center everything on the center of the screen. So it's starting to get shape, it's starting to look good, but as you can see, we can nothing happens when I click on the letters, nothing happens if I type. So let's fix that right now. So in order to first make it so that when I click on one of these letters, it will actually add the letter to the board, I'm going to come to the key component over here, and inside of this div over here, I'll just add an onClick to it. So whenever you click on this div, which is an individual key, I'll just basically call a function called select letter. And we'll create this function right now. So const select letter, and the function will basically write all the logic for actually selecting and adding the letter to the board. So the first thing I want to check is to see which letter did I select, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to get the current instance of the board. So cur board like this, because the board is a state, right? And to do this, I need to import the board state inside of this component, because currently we're not accessing it. And the way we do this is exactly like how we did it on the letter component over here through the context. Since now we have access to it, I'll just come over here, do the exact same thing I did, and it should be fine. So I'll just import this, and also import the UseContext hook from React. So UseContext. So now that we have the access to the board, I'll just create the current instance of the board by saying this. Then I'll just change the current board at the position of my current attempt, which initially it should be 0, right? Because it's my first attempt, so the attempt is 0. And at the position of the letter 0 as well, we'll set it equal to whichever key value we have inside of this key, right? Because we're changing the cell to be equal to that. And then all we have to do is we just have to set the board to be equal to the current board, right? We can actually change this to new board. It makes more sense, actually, the name. And we'll just set the board to be equal to this. And we don't have access to this function right now, but we can just access it really quickly by saying set board and grabbing it from the context, because we passed it over here, so we have access to it. So now let's check to see if this is working. So we'll come over here and we'll try to click on one of these cells, and let's see if this little cell over here will update to that letter. And as you can see, it worked, but there's an issue. It's not moving forward. I can just click and it will keep altering the same one. And the reason for that is because we manually put the values of which cell we want to set the key value equal to. And that's wrong, because we want to make it so that when I add a letter to this cell, it will automatically, on the next try, add one to this one. And it goes on until the point where you get to this one over here and you can't add more letters. So the way we're going to keep track of which position of our letter we are right now and in which attempt we are right now is we're going to create a state for that. And similar to the board state, we're going to create it on the app.js file because we also will have, we want to have access to that everywhere inside of our project. So we just pass it as a context variable and we have access to it everywhere. So I'll just create that state like this. I'll say const, and we can call it current attempt. Just to keep meaning that like this represents what you're currently attempting, right? So I'll say set current attempt, and then I'll set this equal to UseState. And initially I want this to actually be an object because we'll keep track of two pieces of information. It will first keep track of the attempt, right? Which attempt you're attempting, right? If it's first or the second word you're guessing, whatever one, it starts at 0, so we'll put the initial value 0. And also which letter position are you in, right? So which letter are you currently adding to your guess? So it also starts as 0. And we'll just pass both of this over here to our value in our provider. And now inside of our key over here, we'll just import it as well. We'll say we'll just say cur attempt like this. And now instead of saying new board 00 equals to keyval, instead of just changing the first letter and attempt to the value that we're clicking, we're actually going to do it a little bit different. We're going to first of all set the new board at the row of cur attempt dot attempt because it is the attempt that we are in. And then this one over here is just the cur attempt dot letter position, right? Letter pause. And you should see that it will work, right? If I click on R, it should have worked. Let me see, is it breaking? Let's go to inspect element and see if there's any console. It says cannot set properties of undefined, probably because there's an error. Oh, I found the error. I forgot to put a T on attempt. So just save this and it should be working now. If I guess R, it appears over here. But do you think it will, if I press another letter, it will continue? Well, actually no, because we're not changing the value of our letter position. So in order to do that, we're going to come over here inside of our key. And after we change the board, we need to set the current attempt to be equal to whatever it was before. So we'll just grab the cur attempt over here. And we also need to grab the set cur attempt function from the context. And we'll just keep everything the same in that object, but we'll change the letter position to be equal to itself plus 1. So we're moving forward inside of the word. So, oh, I can't say letter pause. I have to say cur attempt dot letter pause. And then you can see that when I click R, it will put on the first cell, but when I click T, now it's on the second one, and I can keep going. But it breaks because it got to the last one and it continues. There's nowhere to go, right? So that's a little check that we can put right over here. Before anything, we'll just check if the current attempt dot letter position is greater than 4. Then don't even move forward. Don't even like continue with the function because it doesn't make sense. We're putting more letters than 5, which is the max, right? So we just return and end the function right there. So this is great. Now we're able to add letters to our cells. But what happens after this? Well, we need to press enter, right? And actually enter our word. But right now, enter is not working. So how do we make the enter work? So for the enter, what we can do is we can kind of separate this. So on the select letter over here, we can actually wrap all of this around with an if statement. And we say something like if the key val is equal to enter, for example, then we do something. Actually, I need to put this outside like this. But if it's equal to enter, we do something else, at least for now, it will be an actual letter. So we'll just wrap all of this around with this. So now the logic for the enter will go inside of here. And what exactly is that logic? Well, the first thing we want to check is to see if the amount of letters in the current attempt is 5, right? So we can't press enter before we typed 5 letters inside of this word. So a really quick check that we can have is if the current attempt dot letter position is not equal to 5, then immediately return and end the function. But then what we can do is we'll come down here, and all we have to say is we have to set the current attempt to be equal to an attempt plus 1. So we'll say current attempt dot attempt plus 1. And the reason why we do this is because we're moving now upwards, like we're moving vertically instead of horizontally. But the difference is that when we press enter, letter pause is equal to 5, right? Because it's on the last letter of the first row. But now we're moving downwards, so the attempt value goes up, but the letter pause goes back to 0, so that we can start a new word. So we'll just set letter pause to be equal to 0. And we can test this out by coming over here, typing a word like this, and pressing enter, and now continue typing, and it works perfectly. You can see that I can't press enter before I actually have 5 letters, but when I have 5, now it's working correctly. So now that we have that done, let's also add the delete functionality because it's not working right now. The delete won't be that much different from this one over here, which is the actual selecting it. So what we'll do is we'll put an else if over here, and this else if will represent the case where the key is actually the key value is actually delete. So I'll say key value equal to delete. And what we'll put over here is very simple. We'll just say that if the current attempt dot letter pause is equal to 0, then return. And the reason for that is because it is the first letter. You can't delete if you haven't written any letter yet. But then we do the same thing we did over here with the new board. So we just copy this over here, like this, paste it over here. But instead of saying that the new board at the current attempt at the current letter position equals to the key val, we do the opposite. We go back 1 in the positioning, and we set it back to an empty string again, because now you just deleted the last letter. And since you went back, you also need to set the board to be equal to the new board, and also go back 1 letter position from the current attempt state. So we'll say dot 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 current attempt, and then letter pause is equal to current attempt dot letter pause minus 1, because now we're going backwards. We're setting the last, like for example, I'm going to refresh the page. If I type 3 R's, I'm currently right over here now because I already typed 3 words. So I'll set whatever is over here empty, and I'll go back to over here. So you can see that this is exactly what happens. And I can keep typing, and I can keep deleting, right? So the logic makes sense. And technically, those are the main functions, or the main functionality that we're going to have in our project. I don't like the fact that they're kind of like all inside of this key, because of the fact that we're going to actually have 2 different ways of selecting letters. We're going to have this keyboard, which is the one in the screen, but we also want to be able to type it, right? So for that reason, I actually prefer to create individual functions for each of the enter, the delete, and the just selecting the letter, individual function for each of them, and put them on the app.js so that we can access them everywhere in the project, so that when we want to reuse them, we can just use the context again. So I'll create those functions over here. I'll create a function called onSelectLetter, and this one will be for the selecting an actual letter, and the other ones will be like onDelete. So I have to create a function on delete, and then we'll create another function called onEnter, and this function over here will be for the enter as well. So we'll just copy all of the functionality which should exist right now inside of the key function, and we'll copy this functionality for the enter, put it on the onEnter, then copy the functionality for the delete and paste it on the onDelete, and then just copy the functionality for the selection and just paste it on the on select function. So you might be asking, okay, but we don't have access to key vol outside of this component. Well, that won't be a problem because we can just grab the key as props. So we'll just say key vol over here, and we'll have it also on all the other ones as well. So we'll just say key vol. Actually, we're not using key vol over here, so it's fine, and not on this one as well. So what exactly we do now is we pass all of those functions as part of the provider for our context, and now we can just access them everywhere in our project. So I'll say on enter, and over here we'll just grab them directly from the context like this, on delete, on select letter, and on enter. And then inside of this if else statements over here, I'll just say on enter if this is the case. Then on the delete one, I'll say on delete if this is the case. And on this one, I'll say on select letter, and I'll pass the key vol because this one needs the key vol for as the arguments to the function. So this is just us organizing our code better because it makes sense. It will make it a lot better because we're going to reuse these functions later on in the project. Now we can just delete this stuff because we're not needing them right now inside of the key function. We just have them right over here, so we don't need those pieces of information on this component anymore. But what we can do now is we can start writing the functionality for actually detecting your keyboard, your actual keyboard while you're writing, so that we can also select letters that way. So the way we do that is all on the keyboard component. I'll close all of the other ones as well. And basically, we need to, whenever we want to detect some key event from the keyboard on React, we have to do the following. We have to import the UseEffect hook, and then we'll have a UseEffect over here. And the UseEffect will have a very specific functionality. It will call some sort of function that will handle the events happening on your keyboard. So let's call it something like handle keyboard. We'll create this function later, but let's just keep it like this. Then we need to access the actual document object, which is something we don't do a lot of React, but for this we have to, because we have to add an event listener for detecting when a key down event happens. And when this happens, we're going to call the handle keyboard function that we're going to create. And then finally, to clean up this UseEffect, we're going to return a function like this, which returns back the same thing. So we'll remove the event listener after we finish this. So we'll say remove event listener like this, and it's also key down, and we'll also put handle keyboard. So this over here might look a little bit weird, but it's how we actually have to put in order to detect keyboard events in React. So now the important part is putting on this keyboard div over here. This is where we're going to put on key down and passing the handle keyboard function like this. And now we'll just create the handle keyboard function. So I'll say const handle keyboard, and this function will be a little bit complicated because it's actually not a function in itself. This is a function that is created by using the use callback hook, which I've actually taught this hook in the past in my channel. In my huge hooks video where I teach all of the React hooks, I talk a lot about this. It's one of the most important hooks in my opinion. It's really useful, especially for maintaining performance inside of your React projects. And in this case, we're going to be using because it will prevent re-updating our components and our functions every time, unnecessarily. So in this case, we'll just say use callback over here. And inside of here, we can just set a function that will grab the event as an argument to it. And then this event will tell us which key on our keyboard we actually typed. So there's a bunch of ways to detecting which keys you typed, but the way I'm doing it's basically like this. I'll say if event.key is equal to enter, for example, then we know that someone pressed the enter key on their keyboard, so we'll just put the logic for the enter over here. But there's also the the backspace. So I'll say else if event dot key is equal to backspace, and in this case will be the delete functionality, so we'll just put the delete functionality here as well. We'll say like this, and then else if none of those are the case, then we know we're typing a letter or something else, but at the same time, let's just keep it simple. So we'll assume it's a letter. And how exactly would we detect which letter we clicked? Well, there's a lot of different possibilities. And I don't just want to do an if-else statement for each possible key that you can type on this keyboard over here. The way we're going to do this is we're going basically to go through the list of keys like this, and we're going to loop through them by saying for each and grab the individual key. And for each key, we're just going to ask, okay, if the event.key is equal to the key that is equal to one of these keys, then we know that we're typing that specific key. So we'll call the onSelect letter function and pass the individual key to this function so that we can actually select it. And we'll do the same thing for all of the other arrays that we have over here. So we'll do it for the keys 2 and for the keys 3. Now for the enter and the backspace, it's simpler. We'll just say on enter, and no, it's just on enter, and we'll say on delete for the backspace like this, and then we'll just save this. And we actually need to import both all three of these functions by also grabbing the context directly into this project inside of this component. So we'll just copy this whole thing over here that we have on the letter component inside of here, just to grab the variables in our context. So I'll just copy this and paste it over here. I'll re-import the use callback and the use effect which we have in this component. And then I'll grab the on enter, the on delete, and the on select letter. Now we'll save this and let's check to see if it's working. We'll see that it's not, because apparently key is not defined. Let's see. It looks like I accidentally typed keys 4 when it should be keys 3. And it says keys not defined on keyboard, which is this one over here. And it is true. We imported the key component, but we didn't actually import it over here at the top. So I'll say import key, and not from React. I'll import the key component that I created from the components folder over here. And let's check to see if it's working. So if I type a letter on my keyboard, it doesn't actually select it, and I'll explain to you guys why in a second. However, the backspace and the enter should be working. Yeah, it's working. I'm not typing anything and it's deleting. And if I type a word and I press enter on my keyboard, the next word that I type will be on the next line. But the reason why the letters are not actually detecting is because on the events over here, this key over here can be it's probably in lowercase. And mine on the array is in uppercase. So it shouldn't really matter if you're typing on lowercase or uppercase. Wordle should technically just know, just accept both. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And the way we bypass that is we're basically going to transform both the event.key and the key that we chose to be lowercase, so that if both are lowercase, it doesn't matter if you typed it one in lowercase and the other in uppercase, because both will be the same no matter what. We could have just done both uppercase as well. It doesn't really matter. We just need to make sure that both of them have the same exact writing, or else JavaScript will basically tell us that they're not the same. So we'll paste this on all of the other ones as well, like this. And now it should be detecting if we come over here. So I'll start typing, and as you can see, it does work. I'll type enter, and I'm typing everything on my keyboard, and yeah, it's working. The delete as well, everything looks perfect. So now we are detecting key events inside of our project, which is amazing. Now all we have to do is start detecting whether or not their correct positionings depending on the word, right? So we need to add the coloring. For example, if this is in the correct position, it should be green. If it's in the word but it's not in the same position, it should be yellow. And if it's not, it should be gray. All of that should be done directly inside of our letter component. So this logic over here, in my opinion, is one of the most complicated out of all of them, because it's a bunch of conditionals, but I'll go slowly so that you guys can understand as best as possible. And basically, what we're trying to check is we need to basically determine the color of the letter, or when I say letter, I mean this little cell over here, based on if it's correct, the positioning, or if it's in the word but it's not in the correct position, or if it's just not in the word at all. And the way we do this is we first of all have to define which word we're trying to guess, right? And I'll do this by just coming to our app.js. I'm literally just creating right now a variable for a word. Let's just call it correct word, and set it equal to, let's pretend like the correct word is right, because it's 5 letters and it can be a word, right? So I'll just paste it over here on the context so that we have access to it elsewhere. I'll save this, and now in our letter component over here, what we want to do is we want to give the an ID to this div that will change depending on whether or not it is correct, or it's close, or it isn't correct at all, right? There's 3 possible IDs that we might have. We might have the correct ID, which will make this green, as you can see over here. It'll make all of them green because I already added the styling for this ID. We can have the almost, which will make it yellow. And we can have the error, or we could call it default, whatever. You just guessed it wrong, and it will become all green, or like all gray, right? So I'll just remove this. It will depend on whether or not it's on the correct positioning. And the way we do this is we'll actually create 3 different variables over here. One called correct, one called almost, and one called letter state. Now, what do they mean, right? Letter state is what we're going to pass to the ID. So this over here is what is going to check if it is correct, almost, or just wrong, and set this equal to the ID corresponding to that specific case. Now, the correct is basically a Boolean that will say if it is correct or not. And like fundamentally, it's not that hard to understand that for it to be correct, what we have to do is we have to get the correct word that we created, which in this case it's right. So we'll say correct word, and we need to grab the correct word from the context like this. Then we'll just grab whatever letter is on the current letter positioning of this letter, because this is an individual letter, and this over here is defaulted to the cell, right? So we'll just say, okay, if it is equal to the letter inside of this cell, then it means it is correct. So this Boolean over here will set to true. If it's not, it will set to false. So basically, we already know which positioning this letter is. So we'll just check to see if the positioning on the word is equal to the actual letter in the cell. So this will determine if it's correct or not. Now, for it to be almost correct, it's a little bit more complicated. What we'll do is we'll say, first of all, it's not correct, right? Because for it to be almost, it can't be correct. Then it also, the letter can't be empty. So we'll say it can be empty because if it's empty, then we don't want it to be yellow, right? Because you didn't even put an empty letter. Then it will also need to have the correct word to include, so you can use the includes function from JavaScript, the current letter in the cell. So all we're saying is, for it to be almost, it can't be correct, because if it is correct, then it's correct. It's not almost correct. So it can be correct, it can be empty, and the correct word must include this letter somehow, right? So we know we eliminate the case of it including it in the correct positioning because this is handled over here. Now, this is the almost state, but what exactly is this over here? Well, this will just ask, okay, If correct is true, then we'll set the letter state variable to correct. But if it's not true, then we need to ask if almost is true, because if it is, then letter state will be almost. And if none of that is true, then it means it is error, because it means the person got like it's not almost and it's not correct, so it will be the gray thing, right? So we can check to see if this works. It's obviously saying that all of them are gray because of the fact that this should only be calculated if the current attempt, so like if the current, I need to grab current attempt from here, so we'll say cur attempt, and we need to ask, okay, if the current attempt dot attempt is greater than the attempt val, then set all of this. And the reason why we say something like this is because we only want to set the colors after you moved on in the attempts, right? So you see they're empty, right? But when I guess a word, so I'll guess, for example, I'll write it's almost right, correct? And I press enter, you can see it got all of this, but this is not correct because it is not in this position. But it is technically T is also in the word, so that's why it is yellow. So we can try again. We can put like the word false. All of them are wrong letters. We can try party, and you can see it correctly recognizes which letters should be included in the word or not, and which color they should be. So I can put like right, I don't know, and it shows green for the first two letters. So it means it's working, the logic is working perfectly. But there's a thing that I need to mention, that is, you guys must recognize that as of right now, you can basically guess any combination of 5 letters, which is not what Wordle is, because Wordle you actually need to guess a word. And this is one of the best parts of this project, which is we need to have access to some sort of bank of words so that we recognize if the user is actually trying to guess a word or not, right? So the way I did this is I found on Reddit a list of Wordle words. I don't know if that's the official list that the game uses, but I used them and I put them on my code. It's just a txt file that I'll leave the link to download on the description if you want to download. It includes like 2,000 words, which is not enough. It's not the whole dictionary, but it's already enough for you to have fun playing the game. So I'm just gonna put the txt file inside of this project, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so as you can see, I put the Wordle bank inside of here. It's just a txt file with a word on each line, and you can see that there's like a lot of words. There's like 2,300 words, all 5-letter words. And I'll close this right now because we're not gonna open it, but we need to use that word bank to detect stuff inside of our project. And there's many ways to do this, but the way I found to be better is I actually came to the words file over here, and we're gonna create this function called generate word set. So the idea is we're actually inside of the game. Every time we play, we're gonna read all of the words inside of this txt file and create a set with each of those words. Now, a lot of people are not familiar with sets in JavaScript, but a set is like, for example, I'll create, I don't know, I'll call this new set, and I'll create a set, and you basically create it like this. It's like an array, but different because you can't repeat values. Also, there's no indexes, so you can't like just grab one value at one position because they're sorted like randomly. And it's actually a data structure that is very good to be using. Now, the reason why I decided to make a set out of this is because every time you guess a word, I want to basically ask the code to check to see if the word you're typing over here exists inside of this set. Now, if any of you guys ever worked with algorithms and data structures, you would know that if you have an array instead of a set, and you use like the includes function that we've used in this video so far, what it will actually do inside of the code is it will loop through the whole array, which in this case includes 2,000 items, and check one by one if the word you're trying to guess equals that word. And that's not ideal, especially since we're just doing 2,000 words. But imagine if we're doing like the whole dictionary with 5-letter words. That would be not efficient at all. And sets, on its essence, the data structure, it has O of 1 lookup time, which to simplify that, it means it doesn't have to do that. It does that immediately. When you ask a set if something exists inside of it, it will tell you immediately without using any extra memory if it exists or not. So it makes more sense for us to use a set instead of an array, and that's what I wanted to explain to you guys. So inside of this function, we're basically going to read the txt file and transform that into a set. So I'll create the set by saying let word set. That's how we're going to call it. And we're just going to make this an asynchronous function, because to grab the words in the txt file, we need to use the fetch API from JavaScript. So we'll say await fetch like this. Oh, I accidentally imported something weird. So I'll just say await fetch. And inside of here, what we want to fetch is the word bank. And to put the word bank path over here, we need to import word bank from the path to the word bank. So we'll say Wordle bank.txt like this, and then we'll just pass this inside of the fetch. And what we say is, after we grab the file, then we'll have a response, which we'll set to response.text. We'll transform it into text, and then we'll grab the final result, which will be the following. The result we can just console log right now if you want to, but it won't, like, the result would just be the list, like this whole txt file over here as a string, which is not what we want. We want it as a set. So how do we make it into a set? Well, the bad part is we need first to turn it into an array. So I'll say word array equal to result dot split, and split basically just transforms a string into an array based on some sort of character inside of the string. And in our case, the character we're going to use is, we're going to tell it to create an array and separate the words based on if they are one line below each other, right? Which is exactly what it is. We'll just, this will be a different element than this. And the way we do this is by just adding the backward slash and the n, and JavaScript will recognize that this is what you mean. Then we want to basically just create the set by saying word set is equal to new set, and we can just pass an array inside of here, and the set function will create a set based on this array. So at the end, we'll just return the set. So we'll say return word set like this. And now we created our set of words, which we can use to detect if we correctly guess the words or not. So we'll export this because we'll need to have access to it elsewhere. And then we'll come to our app.js and import this from the words file. We'll import the generate word set function. The reason for that is because the app.js is the first component that renders, and it's where basically we want to generate the sets when the game starts, right? So we'll create a UseEffect over here that only runs once. And this UseEffect will basically just generate the set directly over here. So it will run once because we'll just put an empty dependency list over here. And then we'll just say generate word set. And since it is an asynchronous function, as you can see over here, it is an asynchronous function. It will return a promise. So we'll say .then, and we'll just grab the words like this. And inside of here, when we grab the words, for now, let's just console log it so we can see it. Let's see if this is working. I'll go to Google Chrome. Let's open our console log because it's a UseEffect, so it should do it automatically. And yeah, it works. It console logged a word set, which is a set of 2,000 entries, and each of them is an individual word, which means it is working perfectly. Now, what do we do with this? Well, I'm gonna create a state over here, which is going to represent the set of words, just so that we have access to it everywhere in our project. So we'll say word set like this, and set word set, and set it equal to UseState. And initially it will just be a new empty set. But then we'll just come to this over here, and after you generate your words, we'll set the word set state to be equal to the words that we get. So we'll say words dot word set, because as you can see, we return an object, so we'd have to say words dot word set. So now that we have this done, we have access to the word set everywhere in our project, but the most important place for us to have access to this is over here, which is where we press enter, right? And the reason for that is because when we press enter, we want to check to see if we won or not. So right when we press enter, we want to check to see if the new letter we added, like if the word that we're forming on this attempt is equal to the today's word. And the reason why the enter is important is because it is over here where if we're trying to enter a word that isn't on the word bank, we'll not allow that to happen. But if it is in the word bank, then we know they're trying to guess a word, so we will allow it. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to come over here. Then we need to form a word with the letters of this attempt, right? Because each attempt is just a bunch of letters together. So we need to unite them and form a word. So we're going to come to the enter over here. We're going to set a variable called current word, and it's going to be empty. Then we're going to loop through 5 times throughout the letters and say I is less than 5, then I plus plus, like this. Then we just want to add to the current word all of the values in the board at the current attempt, like this, dot attempt, and at the position I. So we're just forming the word based on the letters of our current attempt. Then when we have the word set, we'll just say if the word set dot has, which is a function in JavaScript for sets, which basically says if this word set includes the current word that we're guessing, then it's fine. Then we'll just continue moving forward. We'll move on and set the current attempt to be +1. But if it's not in the word bank, then we will alert a message saying word not found or something like this. So we'll save this and let's check to see if this works. We'll come over here, and actually I just remembered we need to turn the current word over here to lowercase, because as you can see on the Wordle bank, all of the words are in lowercase. So we'll just say to lowercase, right? Or else it won't work. Then let's try. I'll try to guess something that isn't a word. And as you can see, it says word not found. But if we try something like false, which is a word, it guesses, right? And it moves forward. Let's try again something that isn't a word. It doesn't allow me. And let's try the word right. And as you can see, it allows me to. So that piece of logic is fundamental to the game because it allows users to only guess words that are like existing words, or else the game would be too easy. But at the same time, we also have to check to see if when we press enter, they actually found the word that is the correct word, which right now is the right. Because as you can see, we can still continue guessing, although we already guessed the correct word, which is not how Wordle works. So the way we can do something like this is actually pretty simple with the code that we already have. What we're going to do is, after all of this, we're going to say if the current word is equal to the correct word, then we'll just do something like alert a message saying game ended, or you actually won. And we'll come over here and let's check to see if this works. If I try to guess right, it will say game ended because we guessed the correct word. Now there's other stuff we're going to do based on this, like we're going to show like a game over part of the website, but we'll do this later because there's another aspect of the game which we haven't actually worked on, which is the fact that when you on Wordle, when you try to guess a word, for example, I'll try to guess false. We know that none of them are letters that exist in the word. So Wordle removes them as options from the keyboard. So that's something we have to do, right? We have to make it so that it doesn't appear as an option. So the way we do that is actually we're going to create an array over here as a state called disabled letters. And this state will basically be disabled letters. It will basically be an array containing all of the words that are all of the letters that has already been guessed but aren't in the word, on the correct word. So we'll just say UseState, and we'll set it as an empty array initially, but then we'll come to the letter component over here. And this is the reason why we're doing this here is because this is where we know if a letter is correct or not correct, right? So we'll just create a UseEffect inside of here like this, and this UseEffect will be just a function that will be running every time we move on to a new attempt. So we'll say cur attempt.attempt. So every time we have another attempt, we'll run this UseEffect to do the check again. And the check is pretty simple. If, first of all, the letter is not empty, because we don't want to check for empty letters, and the letter is not correct, and it's also not almost, because it's literally not it's not in the word at all, then we'll grab the set disabled. Did we pass this as onto the context? I don't think we did. Yeah, we didn't. So I'll just pass this right over here. And I'll pass the disabled letters as well. And then over here, we'll just grab both of them, like disabled letters and set disabled letters. And then we'll just come to the if statement and we'll say set disabled letters to be equal to all the disabled letters before plus the current letter, because this letter is not in the word. And why are we creating this array? Because now in our keys from our keyboard, we can actually have a property that will, like in our ID, that will make it gray when the letter is part of the disabled letters array. So the way we do this is we're gonna grab over here as props we'll grab here as props a boolean which tells us if this key should be disabled or not. And if it should be disabled, then we'll basically change this logic of the ID over here. We'll basically say, okay, we're asking right now that if the key is big key, then we set the ID to be big. But now we have another ID that we also wanna add. So we're gonna do is like this. We're gonna say, okay, if it's a big key, then set it to big. Else, if it's disabled, then set it to disabled, like this. And I already added on the CSS, as I mentioned, the correct thing to make it so that when it's disabled, it will be gray. So now we just come to the keyboard and we now have to pass the disabled prop to each one of these keys. And the way we do this is we're just gonna directly come over here and say disabled is equal to, we'll grab the disabled letters like this, the disabled letters array that we need to grab from the context. So we'll say disabled letters, and we'll just say, okay, if the disabled letters array includes the key currently in this that we're currently checking, then it should be disabled. And we'll do this for all of the other keys as well, which are the other two over here. So let's check to see if this works. If I try to guess the word false, it breaks. This shouldn't be happening, but let's check to see why it's breaking. It's saying set disabled letters is not a function. It most definitely is a function, so let's see why it's saying that. Set disabled letters. It is a function. Are we passing it here? Oh, yes we are, but I called it set disabled letter instead of letters. I apologize. So I'll just pass it again over here, and it should be working now. So let's refresh and guess the word false. And as you can see, it removed the letter E because it's not part, but it didn't remove the other ones, which is weird. Let's try guessing the word rift. Oh, that's not in the thing. Okay. Oh yeah, it's also not a word. Let's guess irate. I don't know. It's not removing this letter. So let's check why that's happening. Oh, I just fixed the error. Basically, the reason why it was given us errors, it's because it wasn't as updated as possible, the state. We were just passing the disabled letter states to create the new disabled letter array, and it wasn't just updating immediately. So I just used the old way, which is basically you just grab the current state value of the state by making it into a function, and I called it prev, and then I just returned an array with the letter so that we are adding a new letter to the disabled letters list correctly. And you can see that now it should work. If I try false, it removes all of the letters. If I try irate, you can see it removed A. Oh, but both of them are already removed. Let's try, I don't know, paint. You can see it removed the P as well. So that functionality is working now, which means we're even closer to the end of the video. So what we want to do now is we want to set some sort of state for when the game is over, right? We want to create a component called game over. And this will be a component that renders a little message at the end when the game is actually over. The message will be pretty simple. Over here, we'll have this div. I'll give a class name of game over, like this. And inside of here, we'll have an h3 tag, which will render different information depending on not if we correctly guessed the word in 6 attempts or if we failed. So how do we determine that? Well, we're going to come to our app.js file, and I'll close all of this. We'll come over here, and we'll create a new state called game over. I'll just say const game over and set game over. We'll set this equal to UseState, and then we'll put an object because there's two things I want to know. I want to know, first of all, if the game is actually over, and it will be false initially. And then I also want to know if the person playing actually guessed the correct word, and it will also be false initially. So we'll pass both of this to our thing over here. So we'll pass this, and then we'll pass the game over state as well, like this. And then what we can do is come to the game over component and just grab all of this information from the context. We'll set it equal to UseContext, and we'll pass the app context that we created that we also need to import. Then we'll grab the game over and the set game over. Then we'll just import the app context like this. We'll say import app context, set it equal to, actually we'll say from /app, and then we'll just grab this, and then we now have access to knowing if the game is over or not, and also if the person guessed the word or not. So we can say something like this: if the game over dot guessed word, so if the person actually guessed the word, then we'll make this h3 say you correctly guessed, or something like that. But if it doesn't, if the person didn't guess the word, then we'll just say you failed, or something like this. You can make this look better, but we'll just keep it like this for now. Then we'll also create an h1 tag over here, which will say the correct word. It will list out the correct word, and to have access to the correct word, we'll just grab it over here like this, and we'll just put it right over here. And then we'll ask, okay, if game over dot guessed word, then we want to say how many attempts it took for this person to guess the word. So this will only be called if the person actually guessed the word. If they failed, you will only see 2 of this, but if they won, then you'll see the 3 of them. And what we want to show is just an h3 tag like this, saying you guessed in, and then we'll put some attempts like this. and we need to grab the current attempt to have access to the amount of attempts they had. So we'll say cur attempt over here, and we'll just put cur attempt dot attempt, and we'll save this. Now we have our game over component kinda done, but we currently are not displaying it anywhere in our screen. The way we're going to display it is we'll come to our app.js over here, and depending on not, like what I want to show is I want to still show the board, but I want to remove this keyboard and show the game over component down here. So what I'll do is I'll just put a conditional for this keyboard like this and say, okay, if game over is true, so the game actually ended, then I want to show the game over component. But if it's not true, then the game is still running, then I want to show the keyboard. And let's check to see if this is working. Oh, it actually won't work, right? Because we haven't set game over to be done when you actually win the game. And the way we're gonna actually do that is we actually need to detect to see if the person won or not. We already have it over here that it will alert a message saying game ended. But now we'll just say set game over to be equal to an object saying game over is equal to true because the game has ended, and the guessed word is also true because the person actually guessed the word. But right after, and we'll just return. We'll say like return because, oh, and I need to make this true. We'll say return because then we don't want to continue moving forward, because right after this we'll say if the current attempt is equal to 5. So if this is your last attempt and you didn't pass the correct word check, meaning the word you just guessed is not the correct one, then you literally failed. So I'll just say set game over equal to the game over. It is true, it ended, but guess word is equal to false because you didn't guess the word in 6 attempts. So now let's go over here and let's try. I'll just guess false first. Then I'll try wrong. I know those words are wrong, but then I'll try the correct one, which is right. And as you can see, it says you correctly guessed. Correct, the word is right, and you guessed it in 3 attempts. Now let's try to fail. I'll just guess wrong for all of them. Like this. And hopefully when we get to the end, it should say you failed. The correct word was right. Yeah, it works perfectly. You can style it a little bit better if you want to, but that's basically it for the game over effect. Literally the last thing we're gonna do inside of this project is making so that we don't have to set the correct word on our own, right? Because if I want to play this, I don't want to know the word beforehand, right? I want it to give me a random word. And the way we can do this is actually not as hard as you would imagine. We can come over here to the words file that we created, which includes the generate word set. And inside of here, we'll basically create a variable called today's word. And we'll just, down here, right before, before we define a set, we'll say today's word is equal to some element in the word array, which includes all of the words in the bank, but we'll just grab a random element in this array and make it the correct word that we need to guess. The way we grab a random element in an array is by saying math.floor to round it down, and then saying math.random and multiplying it times the length of the array, which will be word array.length. Now this should just give us back a random element in the array, and that will be our word that we have to guess. And at the end, we can just return today's word so that when we go to our app.js, we can create a state called correct word, like this. Now the variable correct word is not a variable anymore. Now it's just an actual state. We'll say correct word and set correct word. And this will be equal initially to an empty string, like this, and like this. And then when we generate the word set, we now can say that the today word, so the set correct word, is equal to words, words dot today's word. And now that should work perfectly because we're guessing the correct word. So let's try this out. Let's try it's not right anymore. So let me try right. So none of the letters are there. Let's try false. None of the letters are there. Let's try dream. None of the letters are there too. Let's try wrong. And none of the letters are there too. I know what the issue is, but I want you guys to realize what the problem is. Right now, when we created the correct word before, we automatically set it equal to a variable where the value was all in caps letters. And all of our project is done in caps letter, but the txt file, again, it's in lowercase. So the only change we have to make is on our letters component over here. When we check to see if it's correct or not, we can basically just turn this to be uppercase, so correct word to uppercase, like this. And then if we try again, you can see that I'll refresh the page. Let's try right. You can see now it's actually telling us. So it ends with T. Let's try basket. No. Let's try false. I know it doesn't end with T, but just to get. Okay. Let's try wrong. Okay. I have no. Let's try scout. Okay, yeah. Okay, but it does, I will probably not guess this, but you can see it's actually a random word, and every time you refresh this, it will give us a new word. I'll try right again. See, it's not the same word because there's no T. Actually, I think, is this right? Yeah, I guess the word. Yeah, so this is good. So you can see it's working. Now there's many other functionalities you could add here. You could add the fact that every day it gives a random word just for that day and you can't play it anymore. Now I didn't want to do that because I actually wanted to play the same thing a lot of times, especially for testing. And it's just an unnecessary feature in my opinion to add in this video. But if you guys are interested and you guys like the video, I can definitely make a second part to it where I add a lot of the features that are left, which aren't a lot, but for example, this one, the animations, if you guys want to, maybe like recording your scores, all of that, I can definitely do it in the next video if you guys want to. But this is basically it for the Wordle tutorial. I have a lot of fun building this. It is a complicated project, trust me. So it's completely understandable if you guys have a little bit of difficulty understanding some parts of the code. But what I would do is I would try to maybe just like slowly try to understand and read every part of the code to try to get what everything does. Try to understand what each of the states does so that you actually understand what they do when you're looking at them, because we just use the same states a lot of times, right? And then just try to add one of the features that I mentioned now on your own. Try to play around with the code and add some features, and I think it should be a really good learning experience. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting once or twice a week depending on the week, and I would massively appreciate it if you guys help support the channel. And yeah, that's basically it. Again, thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video. You can check their link in the description. It's a really good platform, and yeah, that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.